Chair, you are live.
Thank you. Well, call to order the March 31st, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Today we have all of our members except David Iams. So let me bring up the agenda here. Okay, see the agenda? Okay, everybody see the agenda fine?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So
Yes.
we've called to order. Can we, Kimberly, can we get the roll call?
Mr. Klein,
Present?
Mr. Waldman,
Present.
Ms. Butler,
Present.
Mr. Sale,
He's here.
I saw him, Ms. Rubio Davies,
Here.
Mr. Svakianudis.
Here.
That's 6, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thanks. We note Mr. Iams is not present today. Okay, great. So approval of minutes, we have 2 sets of minutes. The first one from March 30th, and we have one from the work session, which is basically a pro forma set of minutes that said we opened and closed the meeting and adjourned to the work session. So I won't necessarily share that one, but let's see. Sorry, I'm fumbling around here a little bit. Okay, what's this thing? Ah, here we go. Okay, I think there were a few last minute changes that Diane brought in. Anybody want to offer a motion to approve these minutes? I assume everybody's looked at them.
Hey, Alex, I just have a quick question about the military. When we were talking about the comprehensive plan, Eric was talking about I think it's called Military Installation Resilience Review Study. And I just
Right.
wasn't sure, was that something we actually looked at, or is that just, I
No,
don't remember going over that at all.
no, it's nothing that we've dealt with in the commission. I mean, I've
Mhm.
sort of peripherally paid attention to it and taken some surveys, but that's not something that we've necessarily dealt with.
Okay,
I don't
But
think we've ever discussed
it was, right, and if it was discussed on that night, somehow I don't even remember talking about it, so.
If he mentioned it, it was just in passing. I don't think we discussed it in any detail.
Okay, good. All right, thanks.
Okay.
Then that was just a question more than a change.
Okay.
Thanks.
And let's see. Big thing was we had the public hearing for the first public hearing for Bay Village. And that's really what most of these minutes deal with. But does anybody want to offer a motion to approve these?
So moved.
Seconded.
Any discussion on them? Great. Well, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any not in favor or abstaining?
I abstain because I wasn't here.
Great. All righty. Great, thanks, Ben. Okay, and on the minutes for March 10th, the work session, can I have a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Well, I abstain, of course, because I wasn't there.
Okay. Okay, so that takes care of our minutes. Let's see. Okay. Now on to approval of findings. So this is the big one here for Providence Point, and we have all seen that Christopher is Mr. Beard has passed around, and you know, it's 50 pages or something, so I don't necessarily want to show it here, but you know, eventually I assume everybody has read that in detail, and I would offer a motion to approve.
Is there, before we do that, was there any change to the lane width condition?
Yeah, so maybe this is a point of order. I was going to offer one amendment in discussion. Maybe we can do that now, I guess. Anybody Robert's Rules of Order fan who wants to point me to the best way to do that? I'm all ears.
Well, I think you've offered a document and you want to make some changes to it so that the motion would be a motion to approve as amended.
Okay. So let me show you. I wanted to make a change to condition 48 on the lane widths. I had discussed with the Public Works folks this week, and I have some different language that I wanted to put forward here. So let me bring that up. Okay, so I've done it with the changes in the additions in caps and then the subtractions with strikeout. But after discussing with Mr. Bryce and Public Works, we wanted to just clarify that what we're really talking about for 10-foot lane widths are sort of the effective lane widths. That's basically the distance between the lines. And, you know, because lines have dimensionality, and, you know, if we talk about the absolute road width, then you have to account for the width of the lines and all this kind of stuff. And so we're basically all saying the same thing. It was just more of how do we say it in a way that makes it clear what the intent is, and we both agree on the same thing. So we came up with using the word effective. So that's basically the distance between the lines, and that rather than removing the amount of pavement in the right of way as a compromise to doing that, suggested that we take the extra space gained from the 2 feet of the travel lane, or maybe it's a little less than that, and make a buffer between the bike lane and the travel lane. And it would be, you know, essentially just paint. It would be like a hashed stripe of, you know, about 2 feet between those two. So it adds it adds, some safety to anybody in the bike lane by providing that buffer. And, if there's happens to be a large truck with a mirror, that mirror ends up being over the buffer and not the bike lane. So we thought that was safe for everybody. And, down the road, if that one of the reasons Mr. Bryce didn't want to remove the pavement in the right of way is because you never know what that might be used for in the future, whether it's, a wider lane for some reason or a buffered bike lane or something we can't even think about. So I thought this was a reasonable compromise. So I'll offer this change to number 48. Anybody have any comments about what
I think it's great. Perfect.
Okay,
Looks fine to me.
great. Well, so I would offer, anybody want to make a motion to approve the findings as amended here?
Yeah, but only with an I move, but with an observation that maybe Mr. Beard will just clean up the formatting. Get rid of the strikeout lines and change the
Oh, yeah.
caps. That's fine, but the
Yes.
language is fine. Right.
Yes,
Beard?
yes,
Yeah.
I will do.
Yeah, I'll send you this after the meeting, Chris, and you can put it in.
All right,
I move to approve the findings with this amendment to 48.
I'll second that emotion.
Okay, any further discussion on those findings? They're, all 58 pages or 52 pages or whatever. It's very well documented.
The Magna Carta.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chris.
yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks for cleaning up the formatting, and I think it reads very well now, so thanks for
Very
all the
good.
work on that.
thank you.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
So we have, so let's just make sure we get the vote correct. So it's myself, Bob,
Ben,
Diane, Ben, and Teresa and Tom. Are you abstaining on this, just for the record, or are you voting?
You're muted, Thomas.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we weren't involved in the discussion of it, so I didn't know whether to abstain or not. I've read it, but I don't know the procedure.
you should abstain.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate since you guys weren't here.
Then I
you
will
were just here
abstain.
for the last one. Okay.
You do
Great.
get a medal for having read it.
Yeah.
Thank you. You
Anyway,
can drop that. You can drop that off later, Bob.
Okay, just for Kimberly's benefit, I just wanted to make sure we
And-
get that.
May I have permission to sign names if you've gathered the votes?
It's fine with me.
Very
Fine with
well.
me.
Fine.
No problem.
Very good. I have all permission of the voting members to sign, and I'll get it out tomorrow.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that finishes that up. That was a marathon project for sure.
Now I can go on vacation.
Yeah. And once again, thanks, Ben, for shepherding us through that and
You guys
extending
did
your duration as chair.
Oh, thank God you're there where you are now.
Okay. On to public hearings. So we're continuing SDP 2020-006. That's the Bay Village project over on the retirement community on Bay Ridge. And is there any? So who from staff? I guess we have some new plans to show. Is anybody from staff want to go over that, or?
Chairman Pline, Tom Smith.
Yeah.
I forwarded to the commission earlier this week, there were two drawings from the applicant's team, a site plan and a planting plan. And I also forwarded over, there's only one person from the public who commented, and that was Mr. Urban, and I forwarded over his comments. So you should have those. I've spoken with the project landscape architect, and I think they're prepared to present those modified plans this evening.
Okay, then let's go ahead and do that.
Well,
So
we haven't
who's
we're
gonna,
unrehearsed here, Mr. Chairman. So you had a number of comments at the last meeting, and we looked at all of them, as you well know, and most of them we were able to address. And I think we'll just jump in with Ms. Wrench and have her start to go over the changes, or Mr. Schuman that have been made to the
Okay.
plans reflective of the comments that you made.
okay, great.
Shelley or Terry?
Terry, can you start with the other plan? So what I wanted to do is start with the Bay Village Drive on the lower part of the plan, if you could enlarge that. Based on your suggestions from the last meeting, we were able to narrow the road to a private road of 20 feet and capture the 4 feet that we gained on the building side, which allows us to put a lawn verge between the sidewalk and the curb, which I think is a huge improvement to the project. We also looked at another method of slowing down traffic as cars pass through that zone. And the solution that we arrived at was to use essentially a scored concrete paving, but extend that paving across that whole crossing zone in front of the porch arcade feature. So as cars travel off of the dark asphalt and across that zone, they'll perceive that they're in a special area. And that, in combination with narrowing the road to 20 feet, I think will achieve the commissioner's suggestion of finding ways to slow traffic down as cars pass through that area. We'll have to ease up the radius that's shown in the middle just to allow for fire turning moments. But simple moves, but I think it's a huge improvement to the project. I don't know if we want to
Refresh my
focus.
memory, refresh my memory, what's down on the bottom, underneath this, where the road, where the radius is east, I forget, what does that go to?
There's a conservation easement across the road, so it's basically a wooded site.
But it actually is the loading dock for the assisted living.
Right, but oh, okay, all right, that's what I was curious, thanks.
So
Yeah,
I don't know if-
it makes sense that with the narrower lanes that you need slightly larger radii.
Correct.
So before we move,
I'll just add, Shelley, let me just add, we did speak with DPW, we did speak with the fire marshal's office, and both of them were okay with the 20-foot wide road and at least, reducing the road down to the 20-foot width. So just for your information. Sorry, Shelley, go ahead.
no, so I was just going to
Great.
say, before we move up to Bay Village Road, I didn't know if the commissioners wanted to address this part while you have the plan in front of you.
No, it looks like very simple solutions, very elegant, very effective and not expensive. So I think that it's a step forward. Scoring the concrete it's a great idea.
Nice modification. Very nice.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let's move up to Bay Ridge Road. So we did a whole collection of tweaking to the plan along this road based on the suggestions of the commissioners. I think one of the biggest issues was the speed of traffic with the sidewalk right against the curb as we're trying to protect the critical root zone of the large white oak. The solution that we ended up with holds that sidewalk 2 feet back off the curb, so pedestrians, they're close to the curb, but they're at least not right on the curb. And then we narrowed that sidewalk to 6 feet in order to protect that critical root zone, because the more we shift the sidewalk down, the more we're into the tree root zone. So I had a long conversation with Tom Smith about this, and our conversation basically concluded that it is a different situation. It's a short stretch. It's not a perfect world. If we didn't have that tree to work around, the sidewalk would stay farther off the main roadway. But when we studied solutions like putting in laser cut panels right behind the curb to create kind of a fence element, or some sort of bike lane type, sometimes you see those vertical kind of, they're not really bollards, but vertical dividers, all those sorts of things we thought were problematic within the public right of way. We also considered other planting in that 2-foot strip, but there really wasn't anything that was going to work very well in such a narrow strip. So this is a solution that we arrived at that we thought was the best balance between pedestrian comfort and tree preservation. In terms of the trees, you can now see the red overhead line. That there was a question in the last hearing about where it was, and it was basically impossible to see on the screen. So you can see it now as it's crossing through the site. We did have a columnar plane tree specified, but we went to even a slimmer columnar Native American hornbeam, a variety that stays quite tight over time. And we've centered those hornbeams between the sidewalk and the overhead wire. So we believe that we don't have a conflict there. We removed a tree that we had proposed kind of in the middle of the screen, basically because there was too much going on. We wanted to basically favor the protection of the large white oak over introducing a new street tree. The 2 trees in the island, we believe, have plenty of soil volume. The island, the green area on that island is 82 feet long. And with a 3-foot amended soil depth, we're about 1,725 cubic feet of soil volume, which is actually a lot more than the vast majority of street trees have. And we believe that's plenty of soil for those trees to thrive without the addition of civil cells or more, heavier green technologies to provide soil under that sidewalk. On the drop-off island, we've extended the nose of the island out towards the Edgewood Road direction, and Terry actually has another plan that shows arrows and signs and all kinds of other things that we believe will direct traffic out of that safely without having any problems with that. So it's basically a collection of subtle shifts in the plan that we believe best address the suggestions of the commissioners in the last hearing, which all were very good, and we really appreciate it, because I think this plan has definitely improved given the time that we've spent kind of working on the comments that we heard from the commission. So I went through that rather quickly. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about any specific thing that we've updated.
Shelley, thanks a lot. I think that this is, the kinds of modifications that are really begin to make some sense. What are your thoughts about the soil volumes for the 2 trees on the west end of the west, on the west border?
Those trees are on the, they're not on the road side of the sidewalk, they're on the building side of the sidewalk. So there's probably at least 50 feet of uninterrupted soil. And so I don't think there's really any issue at all with those trees. They're not really locked between 2 hard elements. They're not locked between a curb and a sidewalk. They're on the landscape side of the realm, so they should have plenty of soil.
While we're talking about soils, we did get some comment from Mr. Urban specifically about soils. What are your thoughts about those comments?
I think Mr. Urban has a whole collection of excellent technical construction document level soil suggestions. We always do soil plans, and I know a soil plan is required. So we would incorporate all of that kind of thinking into the construction document level portion of the project, but we absolutely want good soil amendments around the building, on the unstructured courtyard, throughout, because if we don't have, we all know that if we don't have a good solid program for soil improvements, that we won't have a thriving site in terms of the landscape planting.
Right.
So I would just say that his comments were great, but very specific to the kinds of things that we address in the construction document phase of the project.
Okay, so it's a bit premature, but it would be in court. You agree that your client would incorporate them as you get closer to the grading permit?
Absolutely. We absolutely will have construction details for the on-structure planting that will address the soil depth. And we'll have soil amendment and improvement mapping for all the areas that we are planting.
Do you feel, thank you. Do you feel capable of talking about the tree protection plan? Is that within your portfolio?
I definitely feel capable, and Terry, you can call up that plan. We have the arborist on the line, so if it's all right, I would like Kevin Haynes, who's the author of this plan, to address comments specific to this plan.
Great, thank you.
I don't know if Kevin can be brought up to the.
I'm here. Happy to answer questions.
Okay, Mr. Haynes, good evening.
Good evening.
Did you have the opportunity to read these comments of Mr. Urban?
I have, yes.
Okay. Do you have any, what is your response?
Yeah, similar to what Ms. Wrench is talking about with the soil amendment comments. A lot of these comments are also kind of construction document level comments. I can go through them real quick. We would incorporate most of these into our next level of documentation for the project, but the tree protection matting that he's speaking of is no longer used. So I don't know if you recall, but early on in the design of around the tree, the sidewalk encroached on the critical root zone of the tree more. So we were using root matting at that point. And root matting, quick explanation, it's basically a geotextile, layering geotextile on top of each other to create an air barrier between the concrete sidewalk and the soil below it to increase aeration to the roots. But we're not using that anymore. So I don't know if Mr. Urban was looking at a outdated plan or what, but the root matting is no longer included in our plan design. Totally agree with him on the wood chips, and we'll make sure to specify that. The crown reduction pruning, again, that's something that is very detail oriented, and we'll be sure to specify where and how and when that's to be done. And then the sheeting and shoring, again, that's a really detailed construction, even construction level type of issue. And as part of this project, myself or another certified arborist, licensed tree expert will be on staff to make sure that when these things are being done around the tree, that someone's on site observing it to be sure it's done correctly and in accordance with the plan. And then wound repair, I think we might have a mention of, I'll have to double check our plan. If we mention wound repair, I'll have to go through, but generally wound repair isn't used very often, and it's only very rarely used, but I'll have to double check on that one. Any other questions?
Well, yeah, thank you. Good. You were, it sounds like everybody's sort of on point with this stuff. My concern that I expressed a couple of weeks ago or a month ago was the building encroaches into the critical root zone, okay? And I'm very concerned about how in the heck you're going to be bringing construction, dump trucks and bulldozers and all of the stuff that's needed in construction, how you're going to get that into that at the bottom of I'm not explaining myself very well, but how are you going to get it in there? How are you going to get stuff in there? And how, without going over into this tree zone? So what's the answer?
I think, I mean, you're speaking to the constructability of the project, if you will. I think we have worked in an offset from the building at least. I don't know if it's 5 or 10 feet. You can see the light blue shading. That is the root zone encroachment. And so we've worked in some allowance for that. I think most of the sheeting and shoring will be done from, the foundation area, if you will, of the building. So that's not so much an issue. Most of everything can be brought in from the back. I mean, you have to imagine there's a lot of access to the site from, 3 sides. If you take out the tree side, which is the Bay Ridge Road side, there's plenty of access on all 3 other sides. And at the end of the day, we have a chain link tree protection fence, which is going to be everywhere around this tree except, where that blue area is. So there will be fence on the inside of that blue area, I should say. So in order for someone to encroach on the critical root zone of
the fence is where that where the dark dash line is.
Yes.
Basically.
Yep. So I mean, there is a fence surrounding this tree, a metal chain link fence. It's not the flimsy orange type of snow fencing you'll see on a lot of sites. It's pretty hefty duty. So you have to do a lot to get through it. I think that's the answer. I mean, the project's been designed in a way that, it has to be able to be constructed, and the tree save zone is a no-go zone. So I mean, we do this on a lot of sites. It's not unusual. In more urban settings, we have tree protection that's very similar right up against large, more high-rise type buildings than this. And then we get it done.
What's being done now? I gather that the sidewalk has been narrowed on Bay Ridge. Is that right?
That's my understanding. Yeah. I think early on, before this last iteration of redesign, the sidewalk, I mean, there was a lot more going on inside the root zone of the tree, but the sidewalk actually came more interior to the root zone of the tree than it is now, but that was shifted out quite a few iterations ago.
How do you protect, or what do you do with the root zone of this tree butting up against that sidewalk, or what can be done?
So what we're going to do is we're going to root prune. They'll air trench it. So along where, if there's any excavation that's needed or compaction, right where you see that blue area on the top, we'll come in and they'll air trench it. So they'll, a big air spade is what we call it. They'll do that, and then they'll go through and they'll hand prune any very large roots, and then the final roots they can mechanically prune those. So we'll prune them to make sure you don't have dieback of root material, because when you have dieback, that's when you can introduce disease and stress. So if you just clean cut and then backfill with compost and native soil, you have a much better chance of reducing stress and decay.
And that happens anywhere there's a blue line?
Pretty much, yeah. And to be so you understand, it's hard to make out on this plan, but I think it basically is the dark dash line. We did a field investigation to determine the root zone. So what you're seeing, it's labeled as CRZ, but which is critical root zone, but it's really the root zone of this tree is that CRZ line. So we went out and dug and did a full investigation to figure out the full extent of the root zone on this tree. So we're disturbing a very, very minimal amount of the actual root mass of this tree. So usually a root zone, the critical root zone, it's 1.5 feet if we're being generous for every inch of diameter of the tree. And then you only want to disturb, if we're going to try and really save a tree, probably about 10% of that. In this case, we're not even disturbing 10% of the entire root zone of the tree. So this tree, in terms of construction and impact, it's very, very minimal.
Well, we spent a lot of time and focus on it. It's the kind of the key to the visual and aesthetic success of this project. And a lot of effort has been spent on it. And I hope that we're successful. I hope that you're on the scene, keeping track of it, because this is a wonderful inheritance from the last 100 years. Thank you.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for being present.
And just to follow up, Kevin, on a couple of things,
Sure.
Bob just brought up, we're, excited about saving the tree. It sounds like you guys are going above and beyond and are going to do a great job protecting the tree. But I just have a question about what happens in the future. Let's say 10 years from now, the tree is no longer in good condition, or 20 or 30 years. Do you anticipate that a tree of like size and substance will be put in this location? And would it be appropriate to write something to that effect? Because it would be a shame if you did all this work to protect this tree and have it be such an important part of the landscape and the look, have it die back in 5 or 10 years or whenever it happens, and then put, a crepe myrtle in the middle. Wouldn't it make sense to put something about the legacy tree staying in the plan? What are your thoughts on that?
I won't speak to what should be written or not written necessarily in any conditions, but I think what I would say in terms of the tree and tree preservation in general, and trying to replant a similar tree, is that this is a very mature oak tree in a fairly urban setting, so its lifespan, it's not nearing its end necessarily, but it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that 20, 30 years from now, it would have declined and possibly perished. But I think a like size, planting a tree of like size is going to be nearly impossible. It's a 52-inch oak tree. It's, to find something similar. No, okay.
I didn't mean plant a 52-inch DBH tree. I meant, a similar species. A similar species that would grow and have the kind of canopy of this tree. Not, I'm just using a crepe myrtle to be facetious, but you know what I mean. Some kind of, dwarf maple tree or something wouldn't work. So it might make sense to actually put that somewhere in the documentation, that this is the idea of what we're working towards.
Well, I'll pass that over to Mr. Grant and Ms. Wrench, being the landscape architect, to their expertise.
I was just going to jump in and say that all landscapes evolve. And that's a normal thing. And in 30 years, I think whoever the responsible party is, we have to kind of rely on their ability to assess the overall situation. And having a detail like put a deciduous shade tree in this spot if this tree passes or declines in 30 years. It's just hard to imagine somebody finding their way back through the documents and having that be really effective.
Gosh, that would be pretty easy in such a public location, because that will be the thing that you see, and it'll be such an important part of the project. So to have that go away and suddenly put up some small trees would be, if you just let it evolve and the tree dies back and you have a couple of, bushes still in there, that would be a problem.
Yeah,
There
I
would
just
be
can't
massive
imagine.
rebellion from the peninsula, trust me.
Yeah, well, I know, but so I think maybe to clarify, we should consider just putting in something that makes it clear that.
We don't have any problem with you doing that. I mean, the building was really designed around the tree.
Exactly.
When I started the project, I started sketching this thing. The tree was the one thing that started out there, and the rest of the building, the courtyards, and everything else evolved from the tree. So, I mean, putting another huge deciduous tree there, or putting something that's going to grow up into the same location, is a great idea. However, I have great faith in the fact that this tree is going to survive for a long time.
I do too. It does sound like there's been a lot of thought and effort, so that's good.
I mean, you couldn't provide more effort or care or expertise to what we're doing surrounding this tree, and I think from the standpoint of having this old tree be a centerpiece in a senior community, I think it's kind of a cool allegory, and I think it's one of the things that we like at Bay Village about providing green space for people. One of the things about Bay Village is we probably have more green space, including the easement that we granted to the city behind it than almost any other assisted living in the area. There's a lot of space outside to walk, and we felt it was especially true that Annapolitans like to be outside and need to have outdoor space. And all of our projects, this project specifically has a lot of outdoor space for people to be outside and enjoy the outside, because Annapolis is a great place to be outside, you know, so.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that, Mr. Grant. I
quick-
think that would be a nice thing to add. So thanks for your contribution there.
Mr. Grant,
Sure.
what is the easement to the city for, we're talking about the property to
Behind. Yeah, there's a-
behind and to the west. What
There's
is
a 3-acre environmental easement that we gave back to the city from our 6-acre site behind the project. And that easement is a green space with walking trails. In fact, we actually have a walking trail that we built completely around the stormwater management pond, which is the only real senior walking trail at any assisted or senior facility in the in the region. So we provided a tremendous amount of outdoor green space, for the public to traipse through and to create. One of the things that's cool about this building is you have an urban front facing the Starbucks and the CVS, and you have a forest in your backyard. So you can really be in the forest when you want to in the back of the building, and you can be on the street in a very sophisticated urban sort of space in the front. It really gives people the ability to, while not moving out of the building, enjoy activity and enjoy quiet at the same time. It's a pretty amazing site, and both buildings linked together produce that sort of amazing quality too. And of course, people from the independent living can cross over and use the facilities at the assisted living anytime they like.
Okay, so do the terms of the easement limit you in any way to what you can do inside the forested area?
Well, I turn that over to Terry, and I think they do. I think we basically handed that over to the city as a easement, a space that we can't really develop in that space. Am I right, Terry?
You can't clear or grade, but could you put walking paths and mulch paths and things like that? Yes, you can with a buffer.
Conservation.
Terry, is any of that property open, or is it all completely wooded?
It's all completely wooded.
Okay.
The only opening, Mr. Alman, was up in front over here, which has been recently reforested, just Long Bay Village Drive.
Okay. I mean, I was thinking.
There goes your bocce
I was
court.
thinking of some outdoor, fairly passive recreation, but like a bocce court. I'm not being paid by the International Bocce Court Association, but I do find that it's
We were wondering about that.
it's popular and it's cheap and it's just a great thing. And there's no other room anywhere but this great space that's there for recreational purposes. I don't know, but you're going to have to decide to do that as part of your sales, your marketing. But as it is, the entire thing is forested, and you can't clear any of it, even a 20 by 80 foot space. Is that right, Terry?
That's pretty much correct. But I do, if you go out there and look, this is a really nice path around that walkway around that pond. I mean, there is certainly some amenity space out there.
There is. Okay.
It is pretty nice, actually. So.
Okay. Are there any plans, by the way, to do walking paths through the forested areas?
As far as I know, not currently right now, but
there's a path around the outside that's a fire department path that was cleared around the outside the perimeter of the building from the loading dock.
Well, there's
that leads you to the walking path around the stormwater management pond. And of course, there's a sidewalk on the front side that leads you to the stormwater management pond walkway too. So that area over there is pretty well landscaped and greened up. And it's page 1 or page 2. As time goes on, there's probably going to be a lot of other things developed there. But there are courtyards they're implicit in the design of the building of the assisted living that probably have room for some sort of activity zone. The one that's immediately opposite Starbucks was meant to have some raised planting beds in there. But we can look at those things too. The idea is that I guess one of the things we had talked about is we put a big porch on the back of the independent living facility back there that Terry just talked to you about, the scored concrete in front of. And that big porch area back there was thought of as a social space for people to meet as they're walking, to the shopping areas back and forth, or from Starbucks. They could stop there and have a coffee out back. There'll be some furniture there and tables and things like that for people to socialize. So it's a much less active sort of socialization, but it is a social space, and we do expect there to be people sitting out there the same as they sit out on the porch that looks towards the Starbucks drive-through on the assisted living side.
Okay, I don't know that I'm interested in micromanaging. I'm just pointing out what your opportunities are, and you either see them or you don't. And you know the site better than I. Enough said on those subjects. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
So have these drawings been incorporated now into the formal package as amended, whatever? Okay, at any rate, I think that they should be. One of the conditions is that this application, if it's approved and if it's built, it has to be built according to plans as of a certain date. I just want to make sure that little detail gets taken care of. Mr. Schuman, how do you identify this new final iterations?
But we could reissue our set of plans with these incorporated into it.
I don't know that you need to do that, but what are they titled? What's it titled?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. What do we title? We just revised our sheets with these red lines. So I think it would be important to incorporate these three or these two exhibits, at least this exhibit and the one, probably this one as well, into the.
Okay.
Terry, those plans are dated, aren't they?
Well, not the iteration, not the red line here.
They're not. They're still. I mean, this. Yeah.
Okay, it's not that complicated.
Yeah.
Ms. Consoli, these two documents are to be added to the exhibit list. And when the time comes, we'll just need to be careful about saying whatever the dates of all of the rest of the package are, and the amendments as of March 31st. This is to add these. I don't know what you call them.
Okay, as exhibits.
As whatever they are.
Okay.
Yes, as exhibits, because that's what's going to be. And okay, all right. Sorry, just housekeeping.
No, agreed.
Well, okay, look, it's a big building, you're putting together two major pieces. You've left the third piece of it in conservation. I think all of that is quite admirable. It sounds like your intentions from the beginning with respect to this application and this tree and so forth are pretty honorable. You're certainly going to some expense to carry through on those intentions. I think that the modifications, I think people have listened to each other in the course of this process. And so it seems to me that it complies with the factors that we need to look at. I'm not going to go through them. So I'm looking favorably upon this application.
Oh, at this point, do we have any more questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm ahead of the game.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, do we have any more questions for the applicant?
Alex, I just have one question. We talked about it. We talked around it last time, but the conversation, I guess, has been taking place with the Lidl grocery store about a
Oh,
connector. And
good.
I know there was a conversation between Mr. Grant and the Lidl people and maybe the county people. And I'm just, what's the status of that, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, good. Good question.
Well, we have our paperwork and our easement agreement in front of Lidl's attorneys who seem to be taking their good old time doing it. Lidl does own the property now. They paid quite a bit of money for it. We know they're going to go ahead with the development. I don't believe that they have any other choice but to put the connection in because, you know, you guys have the connection also for their sewer and water, which they can't open without. So I believe that they don't have much choice, and I believe our agreement in terms of what things we agreed to back and forth are in place and ready to go when they're ready to you know, ready to fire the bullet and when their attorneys get done reviewing the docs. I think, Terry, have you talked with Lidl's engineers recently? Because I know they're incorporating this into their plans, right?
Yeah, and I think your agreement incorporates the connection in and them revising their plans accordingly to match this, you know, once the approval, if we get approval from the planning commission, that agreement will match this approved plan. So yes, they're very aware of this. They're in tune with it, and they that agreement spells out that they will make the connection in accordance with the changes we're making today.
Plus
But
the fact that
procedurally-
they have to get an easement through our properties in order to get the sewer and water, which means that if they don't do it, they don't get sewer and water and they're not going to build the project. It can't be built without those connections. So it's we're sort of tying their hands up. I think actually Tom tied their hands up a little bit.
So procedurally, should we wait for that agreement to be signed to move forward with the project, or should
we really need to get moving forward with this project now. This project's been delayed for 2 years. And we are spending money every month that we delay being able to move into architectural drawings on this thing. So
I'm just, what
to find the thing, we still have about another 4 to 6 months getting architectural drawings down the whole project and getting our approvals. So you might want to put something in there that by the time we get done with our CDs that we should have this, you know, the agreement. I have no doubt we will.
Okay.
Okay.
But like
It
you
can happen
said,
simultaneously.
you're gonna do this even if for some reason, you know, Lidl, that agreement went south for whatever reason.
We still
you're gonna
build
do
the
this
stem road.
You're gonna do this anyway. So I
Right.
don't know. Anyway, okay, that's fine. So any other questions? Because I think at this point, if we are done with direct questions for the applicant and Mr. Smith, I think I heard you say there were no other public comments.
No other public comments than what we discussed from Mr. Urban.
Okay.
And Mr. Urban is here as well. I believe he signed up to speak as well.
Ah, okay. Well, we if he would like to speak, we need to give him this opportunity to speak before we close the public hearing.
I think I'm on.
Yeah, we can hear you, Jim.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's see, for the record, I'm James Urban. I live at 915 Creek Drive in Annapolis. I've submitted written testimony and one drawing with that I submitted. And so I'm basically here if you have any questions about what I submitted on the technical side or whatever. But I think that my testimony stands for itself in terms of how I feel. I'm in favor of the project and would encourage you to vote for it. So if there are any questions that the commission has for me, I'm glad to answer them. Thank you.
Mr. Urban, did you hear Mr. Hyde's sort of explanation of what tree matting is and isn't and is not used? Did you have any thoughts on that?
Was that a question to me?
Yes, it's a question to you.
Yeah, well, it appears on the drawing, the note about the matting and the mulch, but I couldn't find anywhere on the drawing where it showed those were actually being used. And both of those are pretty important features. So I was just simply noting that it is unclear what the applicant's intent was on those two items.
What is tree matting?
I believe that it is a mat you would put down where you have to get vehicles to go over root zones. I mean, there are ways of having work, material storage, and vehicles entering into critical root zones if they're protected well enough. And mats, which are typically anywhere from sheets of heavy plywood to they actually make vehicle matting to go over root zones. It's undefined in the drawings, and there are a number of options, different companies that make different products.
So if what they say is correct, that there's going to be a chain link fence and there'll be no entry beyond that fence and so forth, would matting be required? And the kind of matting that you're describing be required?
Yeah, if they're not going to enter into the areas that they're protecting within the chain link fence, then you would not use that. Frequently in my projects, I include specifications for root zone protection, because we all know that once you get into the project with the best intentions of never having to go in that space, there are times when people do have to go in that space. And I like to keep my recommendations as flexible as possible for the construction team to not be burdened by an overly prohibitive set of requirements. But in this case, it just talks about matting, but doesn't say when it would be used or why it be used. And some of that I understand we're not in working drawings yet, so that's typically where those kinds of things are added to the contract documents.
Okay.
I have a question for Mr. Urban.
Yes.
Do you feel comfortable with the changes they've made to protect the sidewalk, the pruning and the narrowing of the sidewalk, that it's not going to damage?
Well, you're talking about, there are two sidewalk damage issues. One was from the sidewalk damaging the existing tree, and I think that's looks perfectly reasonable.
I'm referring to what you wrote in there about the sidewalks being damaged.
Yeah. So I was actually more concerned about the trees being planted as damaging sidewalks in the future, and needing some ways that we can protect that, either by root barriers that can deflect roots, or allowing roots to grow underneath the sidewalk in a controlled way. And I suggested some kind of product like Silvacells that can direct those roots underneath. It's pretty hard to stop roots. I mean, once they decide where they want to go, they're going to get there. And so I'm in favor of inviting the roots underneath where you can, to do it in a controlled way, rather than trying to deflect them. I don't think the root barriers are as effective as essentially pathways to make roots go underneath sidewalks.
So would that kind of information go in this approval stage, or in the, does it belong in the grading permit stage?
Typically, I would expect it to show up at at grading plan, but in the approval stage, I think it should be mentioned that there's an expectation that you're going to do something. But then we ran into the issue of the power lines, and my suggestion that maybe these large trees were not going to work. I had discussed in my comments about possibility of using a smaller tree, which does less damage, but I was mostly referring to the cherry trees, for example, on Severn Avenue, have been able to be pruned for a long time and keep a reasonable looking canopy and coexist with the power lines. But if you walk along the walk there, you'll see that there have been numerous sidewalk repairs from the cherry trees ripping up the sidewalk. So, you know, they're getting a smaller tree doesn't necessarily solve that problem.
So we need silver-cells, is I think what you're saying, at least.
That would be my
Yeah.
my recommendation, or some other. I mean, there are other products on you know, out there that do essentially the same thing that we're talking about, guiding routes under sidewalks.
Okay, great. Can you name one or two of the other products just so we can incorporate all three?
Well,
Give the provide.
there are products by a company called Green Blue. They have two different products. I'm trying to think of the product name that they're using now. But Green Blue is another company that makes a product, you know, that essentially creates a space where loosely compacted soil can be put in. There are air spaces that develop above that. So the sidewalk is sitting on the structure, and there's an airspace in there, so the roots are not immediately pressing up against the sidewalk.
So would it be correct to say it's basically a root guidance system? It's trying to guide the roots in a way that's not going to pull the sidewalks up?
Yeah, structural, I think more generic name is some kind of structural cell, which both Green Blue and Deep Root products would fit within that description.
Perfect. And then my last question is, what tree would you recommend, what species of tree would you recommend in the event that 10, 20, 30 years from now, the great white oak needs to be replaced? What other huge canopy tree would be good there? And you know that location.
Well, I would, if in 20 years, I would put another oak there. You know, if that tree is going to go out because of the result of this project, I've always felt that the city, anytime a tree has to come down, or the city grants permission to take a tree down, you should plant the same species that was there, especially if it was doing well. In this area of central Maryland, I mean, oak is our primary mainstay tree. So
that's perfect. Yeah, I feel the same way about Annapolis Street over in West Annapolis. But so thanks. I'm going to try to work that into a condition if possible. Thank you so much.
If I can interject something, Diane, on your question, I just heard from my colleague via phone that we have signed we have the agreement from Lytle completed, and we're waiting for Terry Schumann's coordination with the engineer.
Perfect. Well, that's good news. I think that really adds to the project. So good work. I'm glad that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Urban? Okay. Well, thanks, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, if we have no other public testimony, I would like to officially close the public hearing for this project. And I think we can, at this point, move into deliberations and go from there. So Bob, I think why don't you lead us off? You started with that.
Well, I'd like to hear from others, and I don't want to repeat myself, and I'm prepared with two potential conditions. How would you like me to handle that? Because I really like to hear from the other commissioners as to what they think.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's go around let's go around. I'm just sort of looking at the faces here. So next to Bob, at least on my screen, is Teresa. If you want to jump in, or you can pass whatever you.
Yeah, sure. So I reviewed all the documents and I'm very appreciative of the updated revisions. I think they actually addressed some of the concerns that we had in the last meeting. So that's very nice to see. I recognized Commissioner Diane mentioning about the replacement tree in the event of the tree, failing in the future. And while I'm supportive of, naturally putting in a replacement tree of the same species, I think it would be improper to dictate or require any required species in the replacement. I think that as landscape changes and things change over the course of years and decades, that it should be determined, by those future builders and future developers to be able to make those decisions as it makes sense at the time. Otherwise, I don't have any other issues or concerns that haven't already been addressed.
Okay.
Great, thanks. Tom, you're next on my view anyway.
All right. No, I looked at it. I think it looks great. I like the changes that have been made. I like especially the right turn only coming out of there. I think that's great. And it seems like they've really addressed everything with the protection of the trees. As long as they can, protect those sidewalks and keep those looking good, I think everything looks great.
Great, thanks. Diane, any further comments you have?
I think the questions raised by the Annapolis Neck Peninsula Federation, they're in support. I'd like to say that, but one of the issues was the traffic concerns, and I know I've had some issues there just watching the backup right next to where this location is, with people turning into the Starbucks and backing up onto Forest Drive. So I'm very concerned with that, but we have to go with what the traffic studies tell us. And if the traffic study says that there's no significant impact by this development, while it doesn't feel that necessarily that's the way it is, I'm going to rely on the experts there. So I believe a lot of the other issues have been dealt with, and I appreciate all the work that went into making those changes. And I think it's a very good plan. I think it's going to be good for the city. I do definitely agree with Jim Urban that when we have a tree that's such an important part of the landscape, and Mr. Grant, that when those tree like that, it's a statement tree, it goes away, it's a legacy tree, planting it with a similar species makes sense. So I would promote that as a condition going forward.
No
and
problem.
other than that, I think that's about it. Thanks all for your work.
Diane, I'm not so sure you even need that as a condition with the existing arborist rules in the city, but I wish we could ask them that question, but I'm pretty sure from other stuff I've seen, you have to replace it with a like species if it's in the front of the property. No, you're saying no?
No, I don't think so.
No?
So I think including it would just make it clear that that's what would happen. And because they're really
Nothing stops you
surrounding,
from doing that, that's for sure.
and part of the issue and what the design team talked about was that this tree is going to be sort of a signature for growing old and having stability and stature in the community. So I think making sure that a tree that has a major canopy and stands for what this village is about is going to be important. So I don't think that's going to necessarily change, and having a tree that actually reflects that is going to be important. So I think a condition that says that won't be a big deal. It sounds like the owners are in accord with that. So I just wanted to mention it.
What's up? I think you guys are going to make the right decision. I'm going to end up abstaining from this vote since I wasn't at the last meeting, but it's pretty cut and dry. So let's move forward.
Great, thanks. Just a couple comments that I had. Like everybody else, I'm happy with the changes made on both sides of the building. I think the 6-foot sidewalk is fine. I'm glad it's not any narrower than that, but I appreciate the having the buffer against the 2-foot buffer against the curb. But a 6-foot sidewalk is still, I think that's sort of the minimum width for a sidewalk, even though our standards are 5. I think 6 is a good minimum. So I'm happy with that. I think silvacells are always a good idea around street trees, because we've all walked at many places around in the city that have very uncomfortable sidewalks because trees over the years street trees have made a mess of the sidewalk, and so I think anything we can do to prevent that from really wrecking the sidewalk in 10 or 15 years is really important. But other than that, I'm very favorable, and I think a few conditions that are reasonable. But I did have one question about, and this is really for staff or Mr. Beard or the members who have been on the commission significantly longer than I have, about a condition, for something that's 20 years down the road. Is there precedent for that?
Sure. Yeah, you can make a precedent. You can make a condition for stuff like that. You can make a condition for almost anything.
Yes, I think that's fine.
Okay. It was just a naive question more than anything else. So.
No, that's a good question, though. What's the precedent that we've used? And I'm trying to think right now an exact one, but nothing comes to mind for that far down the road.
I mean, we are making decisions for 20 and 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 years down the road. This building's going to be here for all of our lifetimes plus.
Right, but I'm just thinking about a condition that requires somebody to do something 20 years down the road.
20 years, yeah.
I think that Ms. Wrench went right to the heart of the matter. This document will be filed away, and whatever happens will be long forgotten.
Reality.
It's a gesture at this point.
Well, I think because it's so important, people will say when this tree goes down, 20 years or 30 years from now, what's being, it would be odd for it not to be a question, but maybe that's naive. But at least putting it in there shows our intent to make it happen. That's all we can do.
Yes, I agree. All right. Are you finished, Mr. Klein?
Yeah, I think if people have conditions they want to offer, let's offer them up.
All right, then how about this one? Let me just move it along procedurally. I will move to approve this application with the following 2 conditions, which I'm sharing right as we speak. Can you see it?
Sure.
Yep.
First one.
Yeah, I'm gonna post that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with both of those.
Okay.
Do those agree with other conditions that anybody else has?
May I just make one comment? And it's technical, but the structural solutions that you're coming up with are in county right of way. So we would probably, Terry, correct me if I'm wrong, the county would have to approve that?
Under the sidewalk?
I believe the silver cells will be in the public right of way. County is sometimes difficult to work with. I would just suggest, could we say structural cell systems or an approved equal or an alternative method? If we had a problem with the county, is there another, we talked about tree root deflection, is there some other, if we can't get a structural cell system approved by the county, possibly an alternative root barrier would be appropriate. If we gave the flexibility in the condition, I think it would be helpful.
But you make priority 1 being the silver cell. Got it. Okay.
Sure.
Well, is there a way to,
No, I would add a second sentence to that. I would leave your first sentence and add a second sentence.
Yeah, I agree with
If-
that.
If county
Disagrees.
if county regulation prohibits the silver structural cell system, then root barrier.
Alternative sidewalk protection or, yeah, and
I
route.
was letting Bob think there. I didn't want to spoil his
Mhm.
good thoughts. He's in dissertation mode. You can take a look and see.
Shall be constructed. What's the word I'm looking for? Put in place, constructed.
Instituted.
Oh,
Used, utilized.
Incorporated.
Incorporated. Yeah.
Terry wins.
Hmm.
Jenga. All right.
Very work. I think this is, to me, this is the way to, you got to work on them.
Yeah, agreed.
You got to, this makes sense. I don't know why they would. It's not even going to be that heavily used, the sidewalk.
I'm not saying they wouldn't agree, and we will definitely push them. It's just in the
They might
event they don't, we just want an option.
Okay. All right. We're putting this in your hands,
They're in good hands. Thank you.
Sir Galahad. Okay. All right.
Okay. Are there any others? I think those are the only two that I've heard throughout this discussion. Well, if I will second the motion to approve with these two conditions.
No further discussion from me.
And any other further discussion from any other commissioners?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, well, let's take a vote. All in favor? We say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any dissensions?
Abstain.
And Ben abstains.
Abstain, but with a note of nice work, gentlemen and ladies. Very nice.
Yeah,
Great.
Mr. Chairman, I have to say that I have condition envy. I mean, Providence Park got 50 or 55 conditions.
Oh, listen, wait a minute. Before we go on too far,
Stop that, John Harrison.
your discussion with Sam Bryson, that language, does that need to be incorporated into this application?
No,
Okay.
I think
Alright.
this, I think it's fine because this is a private street. So
Okay.
the full pavement of 40 feet is fine.
Okay. Where's Kimberly Console?
Okay, well, congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing this. It's a great project and a lot of good work. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll be very, very excited about getting this up and making you guys proud of the second piece of the village of the project at Bay Village. So
I think the collaboration shows it's really of benefit, especially Shelley and, okay.
great.
Yep.
work.
Thanks for
we've got-
working with us on this.
we've got a
We
lot of
could get
community
the
input.
findings in
It's
a
great
couple of
to do.
weeks. Are you going to meet the first Thursday in April?
We do have, anyway, so let's finish up. So I think that finishes up this agenda item. And so I guess to answer your question, Mr. Harrison, we are going to meet on April 7th. We have an agenda out for that.
Okay. It'd be great if we could get our findings in.
Yeah, I would assume we would approve those in the next meeting. That's pretty
Thank you, Mr.
straightforward.
Chairman. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Well, that takes us to the end of the agenda. Let me just make sure there's. Oh, so we did have a continuation of the off-street parking requirements, but that was postponed at the request of Alderman Chandlemeyer, so we won't discuss that, which takes us to the last item on the agenda, which is adjournment. Anybody want to make a motion to adjourn? Or
I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, well, thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been one of the quicker meetings we've had.